everybody. Hi, everybody. How are you guys? I guess to start off, we have to say congratulations. It's a huge feat, and I'm dropping water, that you all are here on this stage. And so to begin, let's open this up to all of you. I want to know the moment during the lifetime of each of your films where you thought being here, being an Oscar nominee, all that is involved in that was the farthest thing from your reality. Who wants to start? Am I gonna have to call names? Daniel, it's you.
I guess the furthest was, so we all go out to Oklahoma to shoot the film, and I don't think I quite realized how I was going to become a meteorologist. And literally I became obsessed with the weather. And there was this one day where we were shooting on the main street, and there was lightning coming in, and I was like, how bad could it be? And so literally it was like a 4-hour lightning storm, and we had the crew sort of locked in buildings. That was probably the furthest. That was a crazy day.
Come on, someone jump in. Yeah, there we go.
There was a moment in prep where I thought that there literally wasn't going to be a movie. We knew what number we had to hit budget-wise, and we really could not hit it. And there was a moment where Chris and I looked at each other, and we were like, oh my gosh, are we going to have to go to the studio and say, we can't do this? I'm going to have to shut this down. And it was a very dark moment, I have to say. But what we actually did was we all got together and sort of thought, okay, well, instead of shooting 70+ days, we'll shoot 57. We'll do everything handheld. It was a real group effort of everybody on the film to try and do it in a different way, so that we could hit our number, because we all felt very passionately that we did want to make this film. And so, thankfully, we got past that very dark day.
Got it. Christine?
Well, as I think I was starting to say in the green room, one of the things I realize on every movie on the first day of production is that I hate production. And it's almost, I was saying, it's kind of like childbirth. It's like you have to forget about it, or we wouldn't propagate the species. So on Past Lives, the first day, I think, we all showed up, and I was just like, oh, right, I forgot. I hate this part. So that's sort of answering the question I'd prefer to answer. We somehow got through it and made a great movie.
Absolutely. Yeah. Who else is jumping in?
I'll jump in.
Red.
Thanks, Christine, because I'm the opposite, which is my version of never, ever having a thought about being where we are, which, by the way, congratulations, all you guys. The movies are astounding, and I'm super happy to be in your company. Every time over the longest period of development, we were on the precipice of losing the rights, and then the music, and which in Maestro was a big deal. And we moved from director to director, from studio to studio. That nausea just keeps going and going and going. So unlike you, my friend, the day we got to production, I was thrilled and delighted and actually believed, given Bradley, that maybe we actually had a shot at something special and wonderful. So there is not 1 minute. It's a long wave that preceded it.
Sounds like you had a stomach ache for a really long time.
Oh, the worst. Deadline after deadline, stomach ache after stomach ache, and just keeping the ball, keeping the wheels of industry turning and the ball rolling and people excited and enthusiastic, and that's the hardest part of the job. So, yeah.
David, it looks like you're about.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it was when we were when the studio said that they would give us around half the budget we needed. And you know, when you're making films of any film, the distributors look for comps. And the thing about Barbie is it was pretty hard to find comps. And the comps that we, you know, so we tried Wonder Woman, they wouldn't allow us to use that. They wouldn't allow us to use any of the Disney animated films with female leads. We were allowed to use Bridesmaids and Legally Blonde, I think, but not much else. So when you ask when we were the furthest away, it was, you know, when we were doing the comps and trying to figure it out. But ultimately, you know, thanks, I think, in large part to the marketing team and the distribution, as well as the courage of, you know, I think all of our films in some way are pretty, even though now it may seem obvious, are high wire acts. For the people who actually gave us the money had to take a leap at a certain point. And so at Warner Brothers they did, so I'm obviously really grateful for that.
I think that the moment when you're shooting or actually preparing a film, the moment that you think you have something special, you're dead in the water. So every day is a little bit of a struggle, and just make sure you get it right. And if you start looking ahead and saying, "Oh, we've got an award winner here," you're finished. So I don't think I felt that we were in good shape, or that we had something that pleased people beyond me. Was probably the first time we showed it to an audience, and you just said, "Oh, wait, maybe this will work."
Barbie was exactly the opposite. The first time we showed it to an audience, it was a disaster. It was in, I think it was Arizona.
Was that just Arizona's fault, or was the movie different than what it is now?
No comment.
I will say I became a bit of an amateur meteorologist myself. We had all sorts of weather in Boston. There was kind of this thing of, if you don't like the weather, wait 20 minutes. So, but I found myself embracing the chaos. That's some sort of mantra that I've just grown to live by, and it's given me all these fantastic gray hairs. So we have a whole contingency plan for this situation where it's going to rain potentially in the afternoon, and we will swap the scenes in case, you know, our exterior gets rained out. And sure enough, it does. We shoot the interior first, or we at least attempt to, and it's Jeffrey and Sterling in that scene after the funeral. And the moment we start shooting, because it's in the kitchen, we realize that the kitchen is not covered by anything, and the rain is killing our sound. And we all like immediately said, okay, we have to move this to the other room. And Cord ended up rewriting parts of it. Jeffrey and Sterling completely re-choreographed the scene in real time. And I was just like, okay. I did not think we had something special. I think we had something that worked. And then I saw it when we finally got the cut, and that's when I kind of finally exhaled. But like that, I felt the furthest away from this stage right now at that moment in time.
Andrew?
Well, Poor Things for us was, by a country mile, the biggest film we'd ever done collectively, any of us, Yorgos and Ed and myself, my business partner. And we all come from a sort of indie film background. And for all our heads of department, it was also the biggest thing they had ever done. So it was slightly terrifying during pre-production as we were trying to figure out how we actually got to do this. And I remember at the time we were shooting another film in Prague at the same time, and I was away for a couple of weeks. I came back, and we had this big meeting about the lighting budget, because Yorgos is always used to working in very intimate sets, and he normally, most of his films have been shot using only natural light. But because this was a stage-based film, we needed studio lights. But he didn't want them in the room. So the solution was to throw all the lights up on the lighting rig and then build the sets. And in our collective naivety, we didn't realize that was going to cost a lot of money, having all those lights sitting up there for months on end. And I discovered with horror that we had all the lights in Hungary and half the lights in Germany up on our sound stages. So that felt at that point that this is unlikely to work. But anyway, we got through that, and the rest was a pleasure.
Nice. Jim?
By elimination, I think it was me. I mean, genuinely, if it's not an evasion, of the question, John and I guess as producers, how far away from being a Best Picture nominee. I don't think at a conceptual level ever would have thought that The Zone of Interest would be the type of film in terms of its ideas or its style or its structure, its tone, that would get this kind of recognition or visibility. But that's so in an underlying way there, just sort of stunned really. I suppose in terms of a point, it would be in the life of the film, it would definitely be in the development stage rather than production, which is we were doing on our own. And it would really be a sort of continuum of phone calls from John on various sort of writing retreats. He would hole up in a hotel in Brighton to write, where he would call and say, I cannot do this, there is no film, I cannot make this, it's a folly, it's like staring into the sun. And in those moments, and it was pretty scary because we did it on our own, we developed it ourselves for 4 or 5 years, and spent, we optioned the book and we went to Poland researching it, and so yeah, that was pretty scary because, I thought I would be sort of retraining and bankrupt and stuff. But he would push through and we would get there. So those would be the times. We had a COVID, we filmed it in the summer or in 2021 across 2 shoots, and we had a COVID, a bunch of us got COVID, including myself. I was first man down, which was embarrassing as the producer. And then, but it wouldn't stop production, obviously. But then John got COVID, so then that was definitely a sort of squeaky bum time, because we saw a whole chunk of the film imperiled, which was the section. We were about to shoot the section in winter when Rudolph is transferred back to Berlin, and so that was a bad moment. But the existential moment would be the various crises of confidence of John, that we were ever going to be here. And at that point, I just didn't think there was going to be a film.
And Marie-Ange, what about you?
Sorry, because I have to speak in French. My English is very bad. Peut-être dire que quand on commence à produire un film, moi, j'ai pas du tout pensé à sa finalité, quoi. J'ai pensé au présent de ce qu'on était en train de faire, mais que quand Justine est venue nous voir avec mon coproducteur David Thion, elle nous a dit je ne peux pas rater ce film, il est très très important pour moi, mais voilà, ça va être un film très radical qui va pas faire d'entrée. Il y aura donc un chien qui a un rôle très important, un enfant aveugle qui doit parler comme un adulte de 20 ans, une femme qui a peut-être tué son mari, mais on ne saura jamais ce qu'elle a fait. Mais voilà, tout ça est très très flou, mais il va falloir que vous me trouviez beaucoup d'argent.
Good luck with that.
Okay. So when I make a film, I never think of the outcome. I'm only ever in the present moment of what needs to be taken care of. And Justine Trier came to me and said, we have to make this film. It's a very radical film. It's something I believe in. And it has a dog that has a very important role. It has a child who is blind, who has to speak like a 20-year-old. It has a lead character, a woman, who you're never really quite sure if she did it or didn't do it. It's gonna cost a lot of money, and it probably will not appeal to the public. Let's go.
And you said that sounds like an amazing idea.
Yes, I say yes, go.
So David, Margot and Tom have talked a lot about first reading the script for Barbie and loving it, but also saying there is no way in hell that Mattel and Warner's are ever going to let you make this. Did you feel that way? How did you feel when you first read it?
How are we going to get it made? But really, it was an extraordinary script. It was a singular script. You know, Noah and Greta had written something that was not, you know, once the idea of working on Barbie was mooted, I was like, really? But then, of course, it's Greta and Noah, and you go, well, that's kind of amazing. And it's Margot. That's pretty special. But that script was really the movie. I mean, you know, it began with a script. It's so there. And, of course, you know, it's the foundation of everything. By the way, I just want to take a little detour to talk about that screening in Arizona one more time. Because it was so traumatic. What the audience were most upset about, and this was men and women, was Ken. And what happened to Ken at the end. So, anyway.
He was co-opted by the patriarchy? That's what they were upset about?
I mean, they didn't put it like Pedro, but they were really worried about what was going to happen to him, and was he going to be okay? So, no, the script was undeniable. It was extraordinary. What we were concerned about, or what I was concerned about, and I think Greta and Margot and Tom and Noah all shared this, was whether we were going to be able to retain it, to your point. You know, to retain its singularity, whether we were going to be able to end with Barbie going to the gynecologist, whether we were going to be able to keep things like mother, and there's you know, the film is riddled with them, and you know, taking the mickey out of Mattel. But to Enon Kreitz's credit, and you know, a lot of the people working for him and with him were very, very nervous, but he was very supportive. I mean, they could have cut the cord at any point, but they believed in it, and they understood that if you're going to get something that's special, you have to support that singular vision and that singular writer-director.
And Emma, when Chris came to you with his 3-hour script that's part courtroom drama and part science experiment and said this should be a summer blockbuster, like that just in and of itself is an insane idea with thinking back on it. When did that equation start actually making sense?
Gosh, for me, I mean, yes, because I have to admit that when I first read the script, I definitely felt better because it moved, it was exciting, but it still was very clearly about big ideas, very dark material. You know, it was a kind of mishmash of different genre, and ultimately it's about a bunch of guys in a room talking, you know, other than the sort of the Los Alamos stuff. And so you know, all the way along, the whole time it had been conceived as a film that would come out in July. Like you know, Chris was very clear that, you know, he wanted this to be a big audience movie. He's always had faith that audiences are going to be interested in interesting ideas, and sort of, he wanted to make the film a spectacle, even though it was not the most traditional version of that. And you know, we were doing hair and makeup tests, and we'd look at them on the IMAX screen, and they looked amazing. But I'd be sort of thinking, this is a very different sort of film for IMAX. But I sort of kept the faith because he believed it so completely, and I felt like what we were capturing was really, really fantastic. But I don't think for me it truly gelled as oh my God, no, this really can work in July, until I saw the film for the first time. And when I saw the film for the first time, it was at that point 3.5 hours long, and I was gripped from beginning to end. It sort of grabbed me by the throat and didn't put me down until the film was done. And I think at that point I was like, okay, now I really fully get it, and the challenge is now going to be in marketing this.
Right, which they did a tremendous job. Now, Daniel, you shot for 100 days in Oklahoma, in a state that's not exactly known for big locations and being used to having lots of crews there and film companies and all that kind of thing. You said it's the hardest shoot you've ever worked on, and you worked on There Will Be Blood. So can you talk about all the things, you know, in a limited amount of time that made this so difficult, and how you overcame it?
Well, the first thing was, when we started it, COVID literally was at its height. And so we started in June of 20, and COVID had started in January of 20. So we kept pushing the start date, which actually helped a lot with Marty, because Marty was sort of working on the script, and they were, we were still basic. So that worked okay. When we started in March of 21, to put it in perspective, we built an oil derrick in the movie, which we shot for one day. And in There'll Be Blood, that was the featured set of the whole movie. So it was, we had Jack Fisk, who's an amazing production designer. So we get into Oklahoma, and basically Marty was, we could only make it with the Osage Nation. In other words, they truly came on board. We had people working in costume, they were building sets, we were trying to integrate as many people as we could into the sets. What was hard was the Osage Nation's 2 hours north of Tulsa, and it's honestly somewhat in the middle of nowhere. So we ended up bringing about 200 people, and we put them in hotels, and we used to drive, because of COVID, we would drive 1 to 2 hours to go to work every day. And so we had 250 rental cars. And so, touch wood, nothing ever happened. I think we spent $1.2 million in gas. It was
the budget of our movie.
Wait. Who just said that?
It's the great equalizer. Is this?
Now, here's what I will say, is Marty would only make the film in Oklahoma. Oklahoma bended over backwards to try to give us rebates. I hate to say it, but the film industry now is dominated by film rebates. And Marty was like, we're shooting in Oklahoma, period. And so a little bit, you were in Boston, which I believe gives you a 30% rebate on the gross.
It helped a little.
So anyway, so we ended up.
It's the same.
1.8.
No, but I think the hardest thing of the movie was, it was 80, 90 degrees of heat. It was a brutal summer. We had 8,000 extras. We did 75,000 COVID tests. We built 2 labs in the middle of nowhere where literally you had to get tested 3 times a week. COVID truly put a spin on it, which only, I'm going to say this, only Apple would have made this film. And I say that in a really good way. Do you know what I mean? They supported the film. We have got some flack about the budget. The budget actually isn't quite what they say, just because it's less. But anyway, it was a very hard job, but it was well worth it.
Now, I think most of you were affected in one way or the other by COVID. It had to have affected your shoots, and obviously that put a lot of hardship on everybody. But were there any things that happened because of COVID that actually proved to be a benefit for you, and things that you would want to implement in your future productions going forward?
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, and I think it meant many fewer people on set, which we made a number of movies during COVID, but I think most of the directors really appreciated that. That it kind of, there wasn't that buzz on set that there often was.
I was going to say the same thing.
In our case, we were originally supposed to shoot the film in the summer of 2020, and we shot in 2021 in the end. But what it did allow us to was set up a small art department in London, which Film 4, who we developed the project with, paid for. And we brought we had 2 production designers, so James Price, who we'd worked with on a Sean Durkin film, The Nest, and Shauna Heath, who'd never designed a film before. And Yorgos had come across Shauna's work and thought she would be an interesting person to bring in. So James and Shauna worked together, but because of the delay, they were able to spend those 2 months with a small team in London just figuring out the world and world building and coming up with sort of concepts and building miniatures, models, and it was actually fantastically informative and helpful in terms of figuring out how do we make this film on a budget. And it is something, I mean, we're doing it already actually on Yorgos's next film. We've just been doing a similar thing. So it's just small art department before anyone else comes on board. There's no pressure of time. They just go figure it out, and then we get going.
I mean, COVID was in some ways the silver lining, I think, for all of us in a way which I think it slowed the process down a little bit. It stopped being this, we got to get it done, and here are these dates, however arbitrary and artificial they might be. For us on Maestro, it allowed Bradley to spend more days sitting in the pit at the New York Philharmonic and just learning and learning and learning and deepening his understanding of what it was to conduct and deepening everyone's understanding of what it would take prosthetically to make it work, and writing and rewriting and rewriting and rewriting. So it sucked, COVID, for a variety of reasons, and obviously people lost their lives, so to minimize it and talk about it as a silver lining feels somewhat disingenuous and weird, but yes, we all did benefit from it, and certainly Maestro did for that reason.
I would just say one thing about COVID, though, also was it did make me realize, actually, and because there was one big negative from COVID in our experience, which was that we were prepping during, I'm trying to remember, it was like, I think it was the end of 21. So there was a surge, everyone was having to mask in the offices, we wanted everyone to be together. It's really hard to have connection with people and to manage people and to have budget conversations when you're wearing a mask. And I know that sounds like a crazy, stupid little detail, but I just think it added, we were working with a lot of new people, and it just made me really realize how much I value connection with people when I'm working with them. And it's a tiny little detail, not being able to see from their nose down to their chin, but you can't, it really made me realize how much I value that in-person connection at any point in the process. You can't do it by phone, you can't do it by email, and it turns out you can't do it when you're wearing a mask either.
Or on Zoom.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, you know, when I'm having a conversation with somebody where I'm saying, look, we don't have the money, it has to be this much, I like to be able to smile, to show them that I'm on their side, and I will be there to help them do it, if that makes sense. And it just, you know, it's not a silver lining exactly, except for it has reminded me of the things that are important.
The production designer of Zone of Interest is deaf, actually, and Chris Oddy, who built that garden and the house next to Auschwitz. So he lip reads. So of course that was a huge thing, because you know, he's very deaf. He's very deaf in one ear, a bit of hearing in the other ear. But yeah, and being able to see people's faces is absolutely crucial. But that was something that came up. But otherwise, I absolutely agree with what Dan and Fred said. That thing about time, it happened once in the way you're describing, of just the whole production got delayed, and in that time there was such inroads and depths that were reached in the script and the planning that wouldn't have been reached otherwise. And then interestingly, when we were stopped in the middle of a shoot that I described earlier, so it was intermittent shooting. We had 3 shoots across the seasons. Well, in fact, the winter shoot got turned into 2 because of this shutdown. There were some quite radical ideas that were realized through looking at the material with the editor as well in this 2-week pause that absolutely were game-changing to that last part that we shot, that is the end of the film. And it is just a reminder about how the economic exigencies of the process of our medium are not inherently creative. And of course, in any other art form, you don't have to, I've started painting this painting and I have to finish it in 1 week. You know, it's not, it isn't a creatively logical, it isn't the logic of creativity to make films in the way we have to. It's the logic of money.
For me, le Covid, ça a été quelque chose qui a nous a fait perdre du temps à des moments parce que, par exemple, Sandra a eu le Covid et elle a été coincée en Allemagne où elle était partie passer le week-end pour voir sa fille. Et donc, pendant le film, on a dû s'arrêter quelques jours. Mais par contre, il nous a fait gagner beaucoup de temps parce que Justine et Arthur ont écrit pendant le Covid. C'est un couple, donc ils étaient enfermés tous les deux chez eux. Et c'était vraiment pendant le moment dur de la pandémie. Donc pour des producteurs, c'était formidable de se dire qu'on savait que les deux scénaristes étaient enfermés 24 heures sur 24 ensemble, en train d'écrire ce scénario. Ils sont devenus fous, mais nous, ça nous a beaucoup aidés.
Okay. So in a practical manner, it slowed the film down because Sandra Hüller went to Germany to visit her daughter and got COVID and couldn't come back, so there were delays there. But prior to that, actually Justine and her husband are the co-writers of the screenplay, and they wrote during the lockdown, so they were forced to just work on this script, and here they are, husband and wife, writing and battling it out. And for a producer, there's no better formula. Your writers are stuck together, and they're writing a film about a couple stuck together, so it actually worked out, yeah.
And then, Jermaine, when Cord Jefferson comes to you and says that he's, read this book with Jeffrey Wright's voice in his head, and it has to be Jeffrey Wright, and he's the guy to do it, what does that do to you as a producer when it's like, there is no substitute and this is not going to work unless we get that guy?
So remember when I said embrace the chaos? I mean, the fun part about working with Cord is that we've been doing it for 10 plus years. So we've gotten pretty accustomed to saying crazy things to each other and then just kind of taking a moment and looking at each other and saying, all right, that's what it has to be. Let's move forward and figure it out. And that's what I said to him. I said, that's crazy, right? Like, that you were setting yourself up for the biggest heartbreak in the world. He goes, yeah, but I really, really want Jeffrey Wright. And I said, all right, well, it's the same dance. I'm going to figure out how to get you in the room with him, and you have to convince him. And I mean, that was probably one of those other moments where I couldn't have mentally been further away from this stage right now because, he goes up and sits, in a room, oh God, I think in Malibu somewhere with Jeffrey, because Jeffrey just got off the water surfing, and that was like, the minutes were passing like, I'm just sitting there by the phone, waiting to hear how it went. And 3 hours goes by, and he calls me and he goes, I think he likes me. And then three-hour meetings later, we had Jeffrey.
Good job. Now, for those of you who don't know, Christine Vachon, Past Lives from Celine Song, is her first Oscar nomination, which is really kind of insane. It's kind of insane. I mean, when you consider her filmography, Boys Don't Cry, Carol, etc. I mean, she's the queen of New York independent cinema, like it should be said. And so we're here, we're finally here. And so I'm curious, Christine, like, what do you think this nomination says, if anything, about Hollywood today? Does it mean that your films have gotten closer to the kind of movies that the Academy likes to honor, or that the Academy has gotten closer to the kind of films you make?
I mean, it's probably a combination. Of course, I would say probably I speak for everybody that, I don't make movies for awards, but it's pretty nice when it happens. And a film like Past Lives, which is, it's so delicate, and I think there probably was a moment when we were making it where we just were thinking to ourselves, there was so much resonance in that script that just felt so universal. And here we are making this movie with a first-time director, from a script she wrote, a story she absolutely knew how to tell. But, at one point I was like, wow, a lot of this isn't in English. And is it going to have that resonance that we believe? And it did. And that, that I think is just something that, along with, of course, extraordinary marketing, finding the audience, all of those things, a lot of that's like threading a needle. I'm sure everyone up here has made a great movie that it didn't happen for, and me included. And you scratch your head and you can't figure it out. You know, like what didn't happen for this one? So there's an element of chance, and then an element of just great work, hopefully eventually rises to the top.
And Mark, I have a similar question for you. This is your third Best Picture nomination. Your first one was the win in 1989 for Rain Man. Rain Man.
As a very good friend of mine said to me, why don't you try winning an Oscar in this century? Son of a bitch.
So, Mark, I've asked you, has anything about movie making over the years gotten easier?
Have I learned anything about movie making?
No, has anything gotten easier? Has any of it gotten easier? Well, maybe because you've learned something about it.
No, listen, first of all, just as an observation, it has been an extraordinary year for movies. I'm so impressed with all of these movies that these people have produced. I'm also very impressed, and I think it's a great observation, that the majority of these producers are not American, are actually European. And I think it says wonderful things about the American film industry and, quite frankly, the Academy of what we like and what we respond to and what we're open to, which was not the case several years ago. Anyway, I know I'm not answering to the question, but it's really, I'm very, both overwhelmed and very impressed with all of you here on this stage.
Do you want to answer the question?
I've forgotten the question.
Has anything about movie making gotten easier?
Gotten easier? You know, the mechanics of it, but no, we somehow, one of the observations I wanted to make when we were talking about COVID unfortunately became just another production obstacle. So how do we're talking about rain or anything else, it's like, all right, today we just, our camera operator just came down with it. So who's going to fill in and do that? And I think it gets easier and it gets harder. The mechanics of it, the technology becomes easier, more becomes available to us, but we somehow more complicate it more. And quite frankly, the structure, the financing structure, the studio structure is a lot more difficult and a lot more, it's a lot harder to navigate. Many of us, if we were doing this 25 years ago, would have been the sole producers on our films. And now we have a line producer, we have an executive producer, we have somebody who pretty much only deals with the studio. So yes, it's easier, and somehow we've made it a lot harder.
Now, Fred touched on this earlier, but you all spend so much time, years, on these projects. And I just wonder how you maintain the enthusiasm and the commitment, and then also kind of the integrity of the project that you're holding on to, and that kind of calculus that you make in your mind of the things you're willing to change, the things you're not willing to change in order to get something made. That must be something that is a constant struggle, and I'm curious with how you all deal with that.
I can expound a little bit further. I think part of it is, in the wise words of my grandson, who said, how do you tell stories, right, Grandpa? I said, yeah. He said, well, how do you decide which stories you want to tell? And I was put on the spot, and I said, well, I have to be able to stay interested in it for a really long time. And I think that's part of it, and I think part of some of the stuff that you choose, hopefully, keeps you curious about whatever the subject matter is or the execution of it is. And I think ultimately, it's funny what Christine said, which is that I think if you're lucky, the time will meet you. I mean, every one of these movies resonates for any number of people in any number of ways in terms of their own identities, their appetites, their proclivities, their desires, their romance. And I like to think that in a world, sorry to get a little overly philosophical, but there's not a lot of complexity in the world as in the one we live in today. And every one of these movies, there are multiple ideas that are all true. And they may even be in conflict with one another. So if there's discourse in your movie that hopefully will resonate the way you're talking about it resonating, hopefully as a human being, you just stay interested in it. And if it, we've all had movies that have fallen away just by virtue of the development process, or we've lost interest in them, or they just don't reach that place inside of us. But I think the most important thing is that the collaboration stays fertile. The directors that we worked with are inspirational. The stories hold on to their validity. And then you go, have at it, guys. I mean, I've been fortunate enough, as we all have, to work with directors where we trust them, we love them, we empower them, we support them in every possible way, and then we're on a really good ride. So, does that answer your question? Sorry.
Definitely.
Yeah.
David, did you want to add to that? You looked like you were. No?
I'd like to add one thing, which is I think it's really hard to stay uncynical. And I feel that in some ways when we work with a first-time director, it really helps keep cynicism at bay, because first-time directors tend to be making the movie they've waited their whole life to tell. And that it's hard to be cynical in the face of that.
I'm going to piggyback that. Because, I mean, on top of Cord being a first-time director, it was my first time making a movie. And this is, you know, with somebody that I've been in the trenches with for 10 years. But every day was exciting, you know, just because it was something new. And, you know, like I said, you just embrace the chaos, but you're making something. And it's so exciting to just get out there and make something. And he and I had been through so many different almost making somethings. And once you get to making something, you don't really care what goes sideways. You're going to figure it out. And then on top of that, to Fred's point, the conversation that we were hoping to have with the film is a conversation we've been having our whole careers. So every day was just a new thing. We were talking about the movie when we didn't realize we were talking about the movie. And that was something that that excitement maintained throughout. And now even when we're talking to, you know, some people that I hold in very high regard about the movie, it's even more exciting. So that's been the joy of it.
I bet. And Fred, you had the buy-in of the Bernstein children, which I'm sure has been invaluable for the process. But I'm also curious that kind of, and there's more than one of you who's made a movie based on real people. When you're dealing with their stories and you want to be respectful, but you also want to honor your director and make some art and do those things, like that calculus of getting the story correct, but also not, you know, writing a book report or portraying a book report. How do you ensure that? How do you keep their trust, but then also be allowed to kind of set your director free?
Well, in the case of the Bernstein family, I think part of it is you have to do two things. One is, and they're contradictory. One is set a boundary, and then the second part of it is to invite them in thoroughly. And I know that sounds.
How do you do that?
Well, first and foremost, the first conversation I remember I had with the Bernstein family was I said, well, you know, you guys, you don't get script approval because there's no world in which we can make a movie in which it can be dinged on some level by any kind of financier or studio down the line, so you just can't have that. But we were really fortunate in this instance because Josh Singer, who has written about Neil Armstrong, and he's written a lot of heavily researched movies about real people. We're not precious about it. I mean, the idea was that when we decided to show the script to the family, if they said something didn't ring true, we're there to learn. What does sound like the family? what does sound like Lenny's voice, what does sound like Felicia's voice. And they were very forthcoming about it. So the notion was, we're very willing to be corrected, but the trajectory of the story and the beats that we're talking about in terms of the story, I think you have to trust us that we will make it what it needs to be. And I think over time, that baton, no pun intended, of trust got passed from the family to us, and then ultimately to Marty, and then to Steven Spielberg, and then truly, truly to Bradley Cooper in a way that involved them intimately. And so they didn't agree with every single thing that we did, but they supported the totality of it. And I think it also depends on who you're dealing with. There's certain people, there are reasons, there has not been a definitive Frank Sinatra movie made, and I don't profess to know the reasons why, but I can figure it out. So it's just about trust, but also setting those boundaries so that they feel like any boundary setting vessel, whether it's a parent or a director or anyone else, that they're being held in a way that is both nurturing and respectful.
Yeah, we were very lucky in that we were working from a book. Kai Bird and Marty Sherwin had spent 25 years writing a book, and it was incredibly well researched, and it was Pulitzer Prize winning. And of course, none of the people whose stories we were telling are alive anymore. Of course, they do have family. We did not really engage with the Oppenheimer family until we were sort of on the way, as it were. And at that point, Chris had a conversation with Charles Oppenheimer, who is Robert Oppenheimer's grandson, and basically said, look, I'm working from the book. I want to be really clear. You're probably not going to like everything that you see in this movie, but you need to understand that I'm treating the subject with respect, and I, feel very, it was always going to be sort of Chris Nolan's interpretation of Oppenheimer, but he impressed upon the family that he was going to do the research, he was going to stick to the book that had been written. And I think that when they then saw the film, they felt exactly what Chris had said. I mean, do they think that Oppenheimer tried to poison his tutor with an apple? No, I don't think they do. But Kai Bird maintains that there's evidence that happened, and so, we put it in the film, and it's a very sort of fine, tricky line that you have to tread, but I think that if you're sort of respectful whilst being open to at least sort of engaging, then hopefully, you can find that path.
Now, Jim, you kind of had to deal with that on a completely different level, and when it came to filming in the house right outside of Auschwitz, can you talk about the location and the two different houses, and the one you used for the majority of the shoot, and then the one you used for a few scenes, and kind of the significance of all of that?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, the film was shot entirely in Poland, and the majority part of the film that takes place in the Hoss home was shot by Auschwitz, right by the camp, which is, of course, a museum, a memorial now. And the real house that belongs to Rudolf and the Hoss family is about 100 meters from the place where we adapted a derelict house that just happened to be there, that we always had an eye on, because at first John, the house is a private home, a Polish family live in it. It's actually just the mum lives in it now. People are sometimes surprised or shocked by that, but it's not part of the museum, although it does abut the camp in almost exactly the way it is depicted in the film. In fact, visiting the house for the first time, and we were going back and forth for about 4 or 5 years, researching their lives. That in a way, going to the real house was the sort of light bulb of the film, having optioned Martin Amos's novel, which is a fictional a fiction, set in a fictional concentration camp about a fictional family. It's not Auschwitz, it's not the Hosses. But when you see the real home and you look out the kitchen window and it does look over the wall into the camp, the idea sort of crystallized about this, the questions the film could ask about our sort of proximity to systematic violence and injustice and our relationship to it, and sort of doorway of that. John wanted to make it in the real house. We thought about that for a while. It just wasn't physically possible. It had been too changed over 75 years. And so we ended up in this house that was nearby, but there was no garden. Their garden is like that, even now. There's a real garden. We've hung out in it and kicked a football around it, and the walls are those concrete walls with the palisades and the barbed wire, and on the other side is the camp. The derelict house was just on a sort of scrubby heathland, like nothing, but a few hundred meters away is Auschwitz. And so what Chris and his extraordinary art department is, they sort of rebuilt this derelict house, new roof, back porch where he toasts the SS officers on his birthday. And then most extraordinarily for me, I've never experienced something like this on the kind of budgets we made this film for, or other films I've done. Grew and created that garden, flowers, trees, beehives, real 6,000 bees, I think, are in the beehives, planted it, built the greenhouse, the pagoda at the back. It took 5 months. Chris wanted 6 months, it took 5 months. And to create a real garden. I think maybe some people looking at that film might think we found a house with a garden and dressed it, which is what you'd normally do on a film, but it was sort of completely created. And in there we had this sort of 360-degree world that the actors could live in, and I think it's been commented on. We shot it with this multi-camera system with 10 unmanned cameras. So we were over the other side of the wall, and they could be there, and everywhere they looked was 1943. And that was the world we created. But it was right next to Auschwitz, and Jonathan he always felt we needed to be in the place where we made it. We were talking about that earlier in the green room. Quickly answering your question about the real house, we did, yes. We shot the sort of resonance of that desire to be in the real house was we shot one scene or two scenes in there, which is the scene in the basement where Rudolph, I'm assuming some people have seen the film. It's on release right now.
Go watch it.
Plug. The scene in the basement, spoiler alert, where Rudolph washes his genitals after having scrubs coming back from the camp, that is the basement of the house. And we saw the basement when we were there, and we actually found the family told us about the tunnel, which there is a tunnel that connects the house that goes under the earth and into the camp. And it was in finding out about that, which is not a sort of historically known thing. It's not like the private life of Rudolf Höss is narrated as a big part of the history of the Holocaust, is it? But that gave John the idea for that sequence, and so he wanted to dramatize something, thinking of that idea, like why was there a tunnel? And so yeah, the tunnels that he walks through are those real tunnels, and that basement is so you're in the real house at that point.
And the family that lives in that house just is cool with the basement to the camp. Like the whole thing just feels like it's. I don't know how you live in that kind of environment for your daily life.
I suppose in a way, our process of going and being in Poland for that, visiting, mimics the reality of what it is for them. So that was it was a Polish house that was commandeered. when the Germans invaded Poland, and after the war it was returned to a Polish family. I think a different family bought it in the 60s. So for them, it's, you know, it's a relatively economic, I mean, it's a sort of market town, but it's not a wealthy part of Poland. So yeah, it's a house that people live in. Yeah, and yeah, it's strange to be in that house, and a family have grown up in there, and there's, you know, basketball trophies and pictures of the Pope on the wall and fruit in the basket and a TV and the thing, but that's where they live, and they're a population who economically just don't have the freedom to sort of not live where they were from, so, yeah.
Makes sense. Thank you.
Whether they're cool about the tunnel, I don't know.
Right. Marie-Ange, my first question is, do you know if she's guilty or not?
Yes, I know, but
I can't tell you.
I can't say nothing. Sorry.
And then, can you talk about casting the boy in the film and the dog? Because that dog is astounding, and I mean, I don't understand how you guys got the dog to do what you got the dog to do.
Am I beginning with the dog or with the child?
It's just
what do you prefer? No, for the child, it was a very long casting, like nine months. It was very hard because at the beginning, Justine was looking for a blind child, a real blind child, but it was very hard because you know there is two difficulties. There is le fait qu'il soit aveugle, mais aussi le fait qu'il doit être très très à l'aise avec la langue, qu'il doit être très mûr.
So there was two aspects to the character, that the character was blind, but also very well versed, very articulate for his age.
Donc on l'a cherché pendant très longtemps. On a embauché beaucoup de directeurs de casting pour le trouver. Et puis un jour, on est tombé sur une vidéo de Daniel. Un jour où on n'y croyait plus vraiment, où on se disait on va jamais trouver. Il va falloir faire un choix parmi ce qu'on a déjà là. Mais Justine avait beaucoup de mal à accepter le fait qu'on arrête.
And so they worked with a lot of casting agents, and they saw many young boys, and nobody really stood out. And there was a point where Justine said, well, she was a little bit desperate, thinking, should we pick among the best, among those that we're not quite satisfied with? And along came.
Et un jour, voilà, il y a une assistante casting qui nous a appelé, qui nous a dit j'ai quelqu'un, je pense que vous allez l'aimer. Et tout le monde est venu dans mon bureau et on a regardé cette vidéo de Daniel qui était incroyable, qui s'appelle Milo dans la vie. Et j'avais peur que Justine dise non. Donc pour la convaincre, la première chose que je lui ai dit mais regarde, il ressemble vraiment beaucoup à Arthur Harari, son mari.
Okay. Okay, so out of nowhere, an assistant casting person reached out to Marie-Ange and said that they had to see this video. And so she watched, and it was very appealing. And so she had everybody in the film come into her office. And in order to prep Justine, she said, well, he looks a lot like your husband.
It was amazing, Milo. So we found him at the end, and we work a lot with him because he never played piano before the movie. So he learned piano, he learned playing because he just played in one movie before playing, but a little part in a movie. So it was crazy. He worked with a blind child, with dog. For blind people, so he do a lot of work for preparation for working with us. And for the dog, it was the same thing. Justine said, I don't want a big, because you know in French we have this thing, I think in US too, there is a big, il y a des grosses entreprises qui travaillent avec des animaux, mais c'est une façon de travailler très formatée. Et Justine, elle voulait vraiment quelqu'un de particulier qui ne s'occuperait que d'un chien, qui n'aurait pas une entreprise, dont ce ne serait pas vraiment le métier. Et on a trouvé ce border collier sur une annonce, en fait, avec Laura Martin. D'ailleurs, il va venir là dans 2 jours Snoop.
Okay, so there are dogs that are trained for that purpose, to work with blind children or even for films, but it's mostly companies that work with a lot of animals, and Justine didn't want that. She wanted just a one-on-one kind of situation. And so they didn't go that route, and they just found him on an ad. And by the way, the dog is coming for promo in 2 days. Yeah.
Can I say something about the dog?
Because now in France, he's a big star, you know. He always go on the show TV. It's crazy with this dog. And this woman who work with her, Laura Martin, is crazy. She's un dresseur, je sais pas comment.
She's a dog trainer.
A dog trainer. And now she phoned to me 2 weeks ago saying that now it's crazy. Everybody want to work with my dog. And I say, just wait the end of the promotion of Anatomy of a Fall, and after, what did you want?
I think CAA signed the dog, right? When Zone of Interest got into Cannes competition, John, we would talk, because the dog in the Zone of Interest, the Voss family dog, is Sandra Hüller's dog, own dog. Yeah, Slava. You probably know Slava, yes. Right? Yeah. And there was a dog in the script, and we looked at some movie dogs, Polish dog, right? And John didn't like the dogs. They were too inauthentically movie dogs, right?
I didn't know there was a thing like movie dogs.
Well,
you know,
I'm
movie
saying
kids,
movie dogs,
you don't
animal
want them.
wranglers. So, and he noticed Sandra's lovely dog Dilla and how the dog moves around her, and so it was like, well, let's use her real dog. And of course, it completely fitted with the way the film was shot with these 10 cameras, because the dog can go anywhere. And we thought the dog, even in the cut of the film, we thought the dog was really good. And people do like the dog. And in going to Cannes, we thought, well, you know, we've got a shot with the Palm dog, because they give an award for the top dog, right? And we were we had zero confidence about anything else in the film, but we thought there can't be a better performance by a dog in a film, because the dog is just amazing, you know, moving everywhere, and Sandra closes a door and the dog, it's just Sandra's dog behaving like a loyal dog. And then and then we go and see Anatomy of a Fall with Sandra, and it wins the Palme d'Or and the fucking Palme dog.
I'm sorry, James.
I love Anatomy of a Fall, but just the idea that they also had a better dog.
And Sandra was not happy too, because it was her dog. She was not, he can't be Snoop.
But we're not that competitive, really, ever.
Very happy
Everyone's
for
a
them.
winner.
They should meet, the two dogs.
Yeah.
I've worked on a film that won the Palme dog.
Fun. Which one?
Let's guess what that is.
Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
Oh, yes. Now, Andrew.
But in Barbie, we have a plastic dog. Much easier.
No animal trainer required. Now, Andrew, Poor Things just feels like this perfectly crafted, independent film that had no studio influence until it was somehow sold to the majors because they were so awed by it and they had to buy it. But then you think about, oh no, it's Searchlight and they're financed by Disney. And then I wonder, how did you get all the sex in that movie, and how did they respond to it when they first saw what you were trying to make?
Well, I think David Greenbaum and Matthew Greenfield deserve a lot of credit for greenlighting this film, who runs Searchlight. And as you say, you know, they're now owned by Disney. When we first started our relationship with Searchlight, they were still at Fox, and we did The Favourite together. And they made clear it was such a positive experience. They were really desperate to do Yorgos's next film. And we'd had Poor Things for a while, and we knew it was just a really ambitious project and difficult to finance. But the thing that helped unlock it was the success of the Favourite and Emma Stone's burgeoning relationship with Yorgos. So Emma and Yorgos worked together on The Favourite and decided they were soul buddies and they wanted to do more work together. So when Yorgos told Emma about Poor Things, she just loved the sound of Bella Baxter, and she said, I'm in, I want to do it. So that really made it easy then for Searchlight to sell it internally. Although at the Golden Globes, Alan Bergman, who's their boss and who runs Disney, told me a very funny story. He said, he enjoys Matthew and David coming to pitch Yorgos's next project to them because they shake so much when they're trying to, sell it to Disney. But to Disney's credit, I mean, they were really supportive. There was some anxiety about the sexual nature of it, but the key to that as well was that Emma, when she came on board, not only did she agree to play Bella, but she wanted to produce with us, and we were delighted to have her on board. And she was very hands-on from the start, and I think that gave the studio confidence that we knew what we were doing, she knew what she was doing, and it was going to be all right.
Now, David talked about the memorable test screening in Arizona and how that all went. But I'm curious for the rest of you, are you testing your films? Do you use that as a helpful tool? Are you not what's your feeling on testing and whether it's worthwhile or not?
We rigorously test our movies. I think people always kind of assume that Chris doesn't, but we do. We don't score our movies. We don't like the NRG thing, like the top 2 boxes thing is not a thing for us. But probably about 3 weeks into Chris's director's cut, we start watching the film every Friday. Every Friday we watch the film from beginning to end, and we gradually bring people in who don't know anything about the film. So it might be our kids' friends, it might be, one of their mothers or whatever, and we gradually bring people in. And then we'll do at least 2 sort of big friends and family screenings. And for me, it's not about the boxes, as I said, or the scores, or even necessarily about what people write on the cards, because we do have people write their comments. For me, it's about sitting in a cinema with an audience, experiencing what they're experiencing. There's something very magical about that for me, because I think that what we find is that you start seeing the film differently. You actually kind of see it through the audience's eyes in a very mystical way. You see things that you haven't seen before. And just seeing where the audiences shift and whatever. And so for us, it's a massively important part of the process.
Anyone else want to chime in here?
I think testing is incredibly helpful when it goes well.
I'll chime in and say there was a fear. Well, first off, our movie's a bit of this, and David's movie as well, actually, a tonal tightrope that you're walking with it. And it was really, really helpful to get feedback to figure out if we were, straddling the line we wanted to straddle the right way. But also, there was a lot of discourse after our movie. And sometimes that's scary because you're like, oh, they didn't like it, they don't know what to make of it. And then we had to sit with that and really kind of listen to the conversations that were being had. I want to say it went on for about 30, 45 minutes after our second or third test. And it kind of clicked for us that, oh, that's the conversation we want everybody to be having. And that back and forth, that kind of uncertainty of, oh, why do I feel this way, was the exact thing we were looking for. So that test was monumentally helpful, even though right as it started, we were freaking out a little bit.
Now, it feels like this year there's been a lot of talk about the length of movies, and especially in our short attention span culture, just the idea of putting out a movie that's over 2 hours, and we have movies that are 3 hours, 3.5. So I'm curious about those conversations that happened, and how was it always just that's what we're going to do, and this is what our directors want, and this is how long the story is going to be, and this is what it requires, or was there pushback from the studios on this at all?
Why don't we start with 3 hours?
Might as well start with 3 hours. Well, Chris told me it was going to be 3 hours. He said from the beginning it's going to be 3 hours. I was very, very unhappy with that. Very unhappy indeed. And he kept on saying, The Avengers was over 3 hours. And I was like, we're not making The Avengers. Although, of course, it did turn out that we had Robert Downey Jr. in the movie. But his thing was, look, it's a big story. And the truth is, we've all been to movies that are an hour and a half, but feel like 3 hours. And, I sort of reluctantly got on board, and he was proved to be right, because the truth is, when I watched the film, it could not be a minute shorter, in my opinion, and it feels like the right pace. And as far as the studio was concerned, we literally, when we took it out to studios, when we took the project out to studios, we said it's going to be R-rated, it's going to be shot in black and white and color, and it's going to be 3 hours. So luckily, they were on board.
And you couldn't go over 3 hours, right, because of IMAX?
Well, that's right. We also had thank God we had the IMAX platter, because otherwise Chris might have wanted to go over 3 hours, but he knew that if he wanted to put the film out on film in IMAX, which of course he did, it had to be 3 hours in order to fit on their platter.
And Daniel, for Scorsese?
I don't think he intended to make a 3-hour 18 movie. I mean, while we were making it, it was somewhat of an organic process. You know, we started with a script, and for instance, like the scene, whoever's seen it, there's a scene outside the church where the sisters are basically sitting there talking about the men, and they start talking about animals, and that actually all came from Lily. She sort of approached Marty and was like, there's this, in the Osage, the use of animals describing people. And so Marty was like, right, I love that. And that kind of went on, and probably by about day 90, 100, we were like, this film's timing pretty long. And he kept saying, it'll be fine. So we go into post, and the film was a lot longer, and eventually we got to 3 hours 18. Apple would come and see the film, and the hard bit is when you're at 3:18, how much of the film would you have to cut to satisfy people? So are we talking about half an hour or an hour? So then you start going, well, what don't you want in the movie? Which character don't you want to show? And so I think, look, Marty feels that that's the film he wanted to show. We showed it to the Osage probably in about week 60 of post. And he went with Leo, and they all, look, there was lots of discussions, don't get me wrong. There was lots of people going, oh my God, it's too long. And then you'd be like, well, go and tell him. And yeah, it's hard to say. Look, I come from Paul Thomas Anderson makes very long movies. I think it's what Emma said. I don't think there's anything wrong with a long movie.
Good value for money, I like to think.
We could show Killers with Oppenheimer.
Bring pajamas.
Exactly.
We also happen to run 2 art house cinemas in Ireland, and from a cinema programming point of view, 90 minutes is the perfect movie. So it's heartbreaking when you get a 3-hour movie, because you're just not going to get enough shows. But I have to agree with Emma. I watched Oppenheimer, and I didn't mind a minute of it. I just thought it was perfect length. So I think it is what it needs to be. It's always been historically a tension with Yorgos. But now there are all these 3-hour movies, he's like, I'm allowed to do whatever I want. So I think he's earned that right at 2 hours 20, whatever it is.
And I will say about the length thing, when we were sort of putting the movie out there and we were beginning to sort of do press, and I remember very specifically one journalist saying to me, how do you think, these kids who are on TikTok, how are you going to get a teenage boy to come and watch a 3-hour movie? And I was like, I guess we'll see. And the good news is, I think that this year showed that audiences are willing to come to the theater, they're willing to come and see a very diverse group of movies, and they're willing to sit through 3-hour movies. So, sorry, I think Yorgos might be on something there.
We had the same question about teenage boys and Barbie.
They came to the movies. They all came.
Boy, you walked right into that one, Nicole.
All right. On a final note, I would love to hear how you all think of the state of the movie business today. It's been a rough year. There was a 6-month strike or 2 strikes that put everyone out of work for 6 months. The studio system seems to be in a state of contraction. I can tell you all the bad things that we've written about over and over and over again. But I'm curious, for those in the trenches like you, how are you feeling about movie making going forward? I think this year's films show that people do come out to a variety of films. Do you think the theatrical business is alive and well? Do you think it's hanging on by a thread? Where are we?
Well, speaking as somebody who, we made a film this year that we did not imagine for a minute would, it really felt like a big swing, and it felt like a very big risk. And the film so far exceeded our expectations in terms of box office. The idea, again, that a 3-hour, R-rated movie about big ideas can make almost $1 billion in box office. And, not only that, but open on a weekend against a movie that did even more. So to me, things look very good in terms of what audiences are willing to go see when they're interested. And so I think if we give them interesting movies, I think that they will come. The question is, are we able to give them movies that they're interested in? And I think that that's where the difficulties might lie.
Yeah, I would echo that. As I mentioned, we have these theatres, and the Lighthouse Cinema in Dublin, first of all, for Barbenheimer, that weekend was our best weekend since opening the cinema 10 years previously. It was a 50% higher admission than any other weekend, so that was amazing. And since Christmas, we've had 5 #1 UK and Ireland openings: Boy and the Heron, our movie, various other movies, All of Us Strangers. So we've just had sold-out screenings every weekend for the last couple of weeks. So I think this time of year is always a positive time for theatres. But I think the quality of films out at the moment is really encouraging. But they're all really distinctive, original, often challenging films. And I think audiences, they're still there, and they come when you give it to them. So the challenge is, I think everyone on this stage, life's work is making those sort of movies, but it's up to studios to, take those risks and back those films.
Mm-hmm. Anyone else?
I think what's exciting is, how, just say, taking Apple, who financed our film, who are now seeing the upside in theatrical release. I think that's something which them as a company, I think Amazon, I can't really speak for them. I know a little bit they're venturing into it. I think it's a positive side. Look, Emma's film, I think, has been the greatest thing ever for sort of serious, but also, the same with you, David, with your film. Look, I want all these films to make money, and I love the originality. There's criticism of Marvel and, the remake and the remake. I'm sure the studios are scrambling to find an Oppenheimer or a Barbie, or which is hard to kind of just...
Oppenheimer, duh.
But look at the movies that everyone's representing here. These are amazing films that people are loving, and I think that this has been a banner year for movies in so many ways, and I'm really hopeful that the financiers will take this lesson and just make more.
I think that the truth is that nobody knows what's going to be a commercial success, and it is about taking a leap. And all the films of the people on this stage, there was a big leap, and I agree that the big. For me, I think, again, everybody here, having directors and writer-directors who are bold, brave, and have a singular way of looking at the world and making films is the key to making things that are extraordinary. And I do believe that right now there are a few people at the studios who feel the same, but I also think economically it's been really challenging. I think that the strikes have actually... production is so slow right now. I mean, across the board in the UK, in the US, there's so little getting made. And I think it's got to ramp up, but I am an optimist. I believe in the theatrical experience. I believe if you make things that are original, people will come, people will come. And as everybody else has said, it's just about convincing the people who finance it to take that leap.
I don't know about the rest of you. But I'm also very involved in television and have been for a while. So we did Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul and a bunch of other shows. And so it's just another way of telling stories, and we exercise different muscles. And so I'm very optimistic about what's going on with theatrical, with movie making, but I'm also very sort of aggressively excited about what I can do in television as well.
Well,
I was just going to. There's a two-pronged thing happening, and one is that I think as long as, and there's been great strides made in diversity, so I think that there are voices that are resonating with people that are emotional and humanistic. So to the degree that that can continue and be braided with the reinvigoration of the theatrical experience, which you guys have all talked about and have all delivered on, it's an art form that needs to stay and double down on its artfulness, if you know what I'm saying. I mean, it's really, and Marty's been a big element in that, and we've all been trying to make films for the big screen because we think that is a human experience that we all feel together in the dark and go back to the glory of that. So there's infrastructure issues we have to deal with. We have to, stop turning screens into car washes and shopping malls and find a way to go back to the theaters. And I think as long as people go to the theaters and see other human beings who they can relate to in some way, those stories and movies will prosper. And we go through cycles, and we were in a bad way, and I think it's coming back. I like to believe that it is, and I hope that all those efforts that we've made will yield an even greater and more popular industry, and not ghettoize it. Yep. Thanks.
Well, I want to thank you all for being here. I want to thank you for making these amazing films this year, and congratulations on all the success. And to our audience, thanks so much for coming out and seeing us.